In the vast, open expanse of the American Southwest, the silence is not empty, it is heavy with history. It is a silence that has rested upon these red rocks for millions of years, broken only by the cry of a raven or the whistle of the wind through the canyons. Here, in the shadow of the great sandstone buttes that rise like cathedrals from the desert floor, time is not measured by the ticking of a clock. It is measured by the slow, grinding erosion of the earth, by the shifting path of the sun across the mesa, and by the memories of the people who have walked this land since the beginning of memory. This is a landscape of extremes, scorching heat that makes the horizon shimmer, biting wind that carries the scent of sagebrush, and a dryness that sucks the moisture from the very air. Yet, within this unforgiving environment, a delicate and enduring art form was born. It is the art of earth, water, and fire. The story of pottery here is the story of survival. Before there was plastic, before there was metal, there was clay. But to find it, one must know how to listen to the land. The journey begins early, in the cool blue light before dawn, before the sun turns the canyon into a furnace. The matriarchs of the village lead the way. They do not use maps. The location of the best clay veins is a secret, a precious inheritance passed down from mother to daughter, whispered like a prayer. These veins run deep within the earth, remnants of ancient geological eras when this desert was a vast inland sea. Digging the clay is not merely a physical act, it is a spiritual transaction. The earth is considered a living mother, the clay mother. You cannot simply take from her, you must ask a permission. In the quiet of the morning, an offering is often made, perhaps a pinch of cornmeal or a silent word of gratitude, acknowledging that the clay is the flesh of the earth itself. The raw material is deceptive. To the untrained eye, it looks like dry, useless shale. It is hard, brittle, and unyielding. It resists the shovel. Gathering enough for a firing requires immense physical effort, a testament to the strength of these women who are as resilient as the cedar trees clinging to the mesa edge. They taste the clay to test its purity, looking for the right balance of salt and sand. Once the harvest is brought back to the pueblo, the true labor begins. This is the stage of purification. The raw earth is full of impurities, stones, roots, and ancient salts that could ruin a vessel. The women sit for hours, breaking the hard clumps into smaller and smaller pieces, eventually grinding it into a fine dust on large basalt matats. It is a rhythm of destruction and creation, a sound that has echoed against these adobe walls for centuries. But clay alone is often too sticky, too prone to shrinking. To give it the strength to survive the fire, it needs a skeleton. This skeleton comes from the past. The potters collect sherds, broken pieces of ancient pottery that litter the ground around the village. These fragments of history are ground into a coarse powder called grog, or temper. When this old dust is mixed with the new clay, a profound connection is made. The new vessel literally contains the DNA of the ancestors' work. The past holds the present together. Then comes the water. In the desert, water is life, and spending it on clay is a sacrifice. As the water meets the dust, a transformation occurs. The smell of wet earth, the scent of rain after a drought, fills the air. The mixing is done by foot and by hand. It is a full-body engagement. They stomp and knead, driving out every pocket of air. An air bubble is an enemy. In the heat of the kiln, it will expand and shatter the pot like a bomb. The clay must be wedged until it is smooth, elastic, and uniform, a process that demands patience and strong, knowing hands. Unlike the potters of the Old World, the indigenous peoples of the Americas did not use the potter's wheel. They did not rely on mechanical speed. Instead, they used the coil method, a technique that requires a stillness of mind and body. The process often begins in a puki, a shallow bowl used to support the rounded base of the new pot. From there, the potter rolls the clay into long, snake-like ropes. She circles the base, building the walls up layer by layer, spiral by spiral. It is a slow ascent. The pot grows like a plant reaching for the sun. This method allows for shapes that a wheel cannot easily produce: asymmetrical forms, organic bulges, and necks that tilt with a human grace. The young granddaughter watches the elder. She mimics the movements, her small hands struggling to maintain an even thickness. The grandmother guides her, not with harsh words, but with a gentle touch, correcting the pressure. She teaches her that if the walls are too thick, the pot will be heavy and may explode. If they are too thin, it will collapse under its own weight. It is a lesson in balance, a lesson that applies to life as much as to pottery. Once the form is built, the evidence of the coils must be erased. Using a piece of dried gourd, known as a kajep, or a smooth river stone, the potter scrapes and smooths the sides. She unifies the separate coils into a single, continuous surface. The vessel begins to breathe. It takes on a personality, but it is still rough, still porous. To make the pot watertight and beautiful without the use of glass-based glazes, the women use a technique called burnishing. This is the art of friction. After applying a thin layer of slip, a liquid suspension of ultra-fine colored clay, they take a polishing stone. These stones are heirlooms, passed down for generations, worn smooth by the thumbs of ancestors. For hours, the potter rubs the surface of the drying pot. The pressure compresses the clay particles, aligning them like shingles on a roof. Slowly, a deep, warm luster emerges. It is not a shiny glaze sitting on top. It is the skin of the pot itself, glowing from within. Before the paint touches the surface, there is the waiting. The drying phase is critical and often overlooked. The pots must sit in the shade, protected from the direct sun and wind, losing their moisture slowly. If they dry too fast, they warp. If they are fired while damp, they burst. This waiting game teaches the village to slow down, to align their schedule with the evaporation of water. Only when the pot is bone dry and warm to the touch is it ready for the artist's brush. Now, the vessel is a canvas. The painting is done with brushes that would seem primitive to a modern artist, yet they are capable of incredible precision. They are made from the leaf of the yucca plant, chewed at the end to leave only a few stiff fibers. The black paint is often derived from the boiled juice of the Rocky Mountain bee plant, a thick, dark syrup that has been prepared days in advance. It is a sticky, organic substance that will turn into carbon in the fire. The designs are complex geographies of the spirit world. There are no sketches, no rulers. The geometry exists in the mind of the artist. She paints lines that represent the falling rain, step patterns that mirror the mountains and clouds, and stylized feathers that carry prayers to the sky. Notice the focus. She holds her breath to steady her hand. A single slip cannot be erased. The clay absorbs the paint instantly. In many traditions, a spirit line is left, a small break in the border around the rim. This ensures that the spirit of the maker is not trapped inside the pot, and that her creativity can flow out to her next creation. As the sun begins to lower, casting long purple shadows across the valley, the village prepares for the climax of the process, the firing. This is the moment of truth. All the days of digging, cleaning, shaping, and painting lead to this. It is a dangerous threshold. The pots are carried out to the firing ground, a place scorched by countless previous fires. There are no thermometers here, no gas valves. The kiln is built from the elements at hand. First, a grate of old metal or stone. Then, the pots are clustered together, touching but not crowding. They are covered with large shards of broken pottery, a protective shell that shields the new babies from the direct, violent lick of the flame, which could cause fire clouds, dark carbon smudges, where they are not wanted. The fuel is specific. Often slabs of dried sheep, dung, or cedar wood are used. These fuels burn hot and slow, creating a muffled oven effect. The chemistry of the fire is masterfully controlled. If the air flows freely, the oxygen turns the clay red. But if the potters choose to smother the fire with powdered manure at the peak of the heat, cutting off the oxygen, the clay turns a deep, lustrous black. This is carbon reduction, an ancient alchemy performed in the open air. The fire is lit. As the smoke rises, carrying the prayers of the potters to the heavens, the anxiety in the village is palpable. The temperature will rise to nearly 900 or 1,000 degrees Celsius. Inside that mound of fire, a chemical metamorphosis is taking place. The clay is losing its chemically bonded water. It is becoming ceramic. It is turning to stone. Night falls, and the fire becomes a beacon in the vast darkness of the desert. The wind is the unpredictable variable. A sudden gust can cause uneven heating, cracking the pots. The women watch the color of the flame, the smell of the smoke. They listen. Sometimes a heartbreaking ping or pop echoes from the fire, the sound of a vessel shattering. It is a sound that brings a wince to every potter's face. But they cannot intervene. The fire is the master now. The vigil lasts through the night. The children fall asleep watching the glowing embers, dreaming of the shapes hidden within. By dawn, the fuel has burned down to a mound of white and gray ash. The air is cold, but the mound radiates a fierce heat. The cooling must be slow. If the cold morning air hits the hot pots too fast, they will shatter from thermal shock. It is a lesson in patience until the very end. The pots are singing now, tiny high-pitched pings as the clay contracts and settles into its final form. Finally, the moment arrives. With a stick, the grandmother gently pulls away the remnants of the firing. The ash falls away, revealing the treasure beneath. It is a moment of pure magic. The dull brown earth has become vibrant terracotta, stark black, and creamy white. The colors have set, the pots are tapped. They ring with a clear, bell-like tone, signaling that they are sound, that they are strong. The young girl reaches for her pot. It is warm, almost hot, buzzing with the energy of the fire. She wipes the ash from its surface. It is not perfect. Perhaps the line work is a little wavery, or the shape is slightly lopsided. But to her grandmother, it is a masterpiece. It represents the survival of their culture. It is proof that the next generation has the hands, the heart, and the patience to carry the weight of tradition. For countless generations, the lives of Native American nations unfolded alongside the movements of animals, guided not by calendars, but by behavior, sound, and instinct. The land spoke through its creatures, and those who listened learned when to travel, when to hunt, and when to wait. Survival was never random. It was built on observation, refined over thousands of years. As winter loosened its grip, the first signs of change came not from the sky, but from animals. Birds returned to riverbanks, their calls echoing through still cold valleys. Deer descended from higher ground, following the first exposed plants beneath melting snow. Hunters watched closely, knowing that these movements marked the beginning of a new cycle. Dogs moved ahead of their human companions, alert to unfamiliar scents, guiding camps toward fresh resources. The spring hunt was cautious, deliberate, designed to take only what was needed after the long winter. Summer brought abundance and complexity. Plains filled with life as bison herds expanded across grasslands, their migrations reshaping the land itself. Native hunters understood that bison were not endless. They studied calving seasons, avoided overhunting, and allowed herds to recover. In forests, deer, elk, and bear fed heavily, building strength for colder months ahead. Rivers filled with fish, and entire communities gathered at known crossings, using traps, nets, and spears designed to capture without destroying future runs. Children learned by watching, absorbing patterns long before they ever held a weapon. Along the coasts, the ocean defined life. Seals hauled out onto rocks, whales passed along ancient routes, and salmon returned with precise timing year after year. These events were not surprises. They were expected, prepared for, and honored. Animals dictated when villages gathered, when food was preserved, and when ceremonies were held. The success of a season depended on understanding not just one species, but how all life interacted. Autumn was the season of preparation. Hunters followed fattened animals as they moved toward winter ranges. Deer hides were transformed into clothing. Feathers were collected for insulation and ceremony. Fish were dried and smoked. Dogs carried loads between camps, their endurance extending the reach of entire communities. Every task had urgency, not driven by fear, but by knowledge of what winter would demand. Winter changed everything. Snow erased familiar paths, but revealed new information. Tracks told stories in perfect detail. The speed of a fox, the weight of a moose, the hunger of a wolf. Hunters moved slowly, conserving energy, reading the landscape as if it were a living map. In the north, seal hunters waited in silence beside breathing holes in the ice, sometimes for hours, trusting patience over force. In forests, bow hunters used snow to their advantage, closing distance on prey that could no longer move quickly. Throughout the cold months, animals shaped daily decisions. Bears disappeared into dens, teaching humans the value of rest and conservation. Wolves continued to hunt cooperatively, reinforcing lessons of teamwork and family structure. Birds vanished, signaling the harshest phase of the year. Firelight replaced daylight, and stories became the tools that preserved knowledge when the land slept. Crucially, Native Americans did not attempt to domesticate most animals. There were no cattle, no horses, no pigs, no sheep, no goats before European arrival. The land had no grazing livestock, reshaping it. The only true companions were dogs, whose partnership with humans stretched back millennia, and in parts of the Southwest, turkeys, raised for feathers and food. The rest of the animal world remained wild, respected, studied, and approached with restraint rather than control. When Europeans arrived with horses and livestock, the balance shifted. New animals altered landscapes, hunting patterns, and mobility. Horses revolutionized plains life within a few generations, but they also marked a turning point, the beginning of a world that no longer followed the same rules. Yet the older knowledge endured. Native nations adapted, just as they always had, integrating new animals while preserving ancient understanding of the land's original rhythms. Even today, that knowledge remains alive. In ceremonies, in seasonal hunts, in conservation practices, indigenous communities continue to honor animals not as resources, but as relatives within a shared system. The survival of Native Americans was never about dominance. It was about awareness, knowing when to act, when to wait, and when to let nature lead. This relationship, forged through centuries of shared struggle and balance, stands as one of humanity's deepest examples of coexistence. Long before modern ecology had a name, the First Nations lived it, guided by animals, shaped by seasons, and sustained by respect.
Listen closely, child.
stories keep us warm. The land speaks to those who listen. The bear sleeps, but its spirit watches.
And so the first caribou learned to walk upon the snow, guided only by the winter moon.
Secure that one tight. Good season.
Listen to what the earth says.
The deer has returned.
Yes, the water is calm today.
In the shadowed cathedrals of the ancient rainforest, silence is never truly empty. It is waiting. Here, where the cedar touches the sky and the moss drinks the rain, time is not measured by the ticking of a clock. It is measured by the flow of water. For thousands of years, the first nations of this coast lived by a simple, powerful truth. The land speaks, but it only speaks to those who know how to listen. They did not seek to conquer this wilderness. They became part of it. They learned that survival is not a fight, it is a partnership. As the seasons turn, a signal is sent from the depths of the ocean. The salmon are coming home, and so the preparation begins. Look closely. There is no steel here, no engines, only stone, wood, and the ingenuity of hands guided by generations of ancestors. They are building a machine made of nature itself, a weir designed not to trap every fish, but to sustain the river for tomorrow. This is not merely a harvest. It is a sacred appointment, a promise kept between the people and the river. What you are about to witness is a technology of balance, a way of life where every knot tied and every fish caught is an act of reverence. Step back into a world where humanity and nature move as one. Listen to the rhythm. The cycle begins.
Guide us here.
Whoa, that made a big splash.
The spirit of the river guides this angle.
Here, little one.
Leave this space for their journey.
It is strong. The water flows well.
Yes. The salmon will be pleased with this house we have built for them. The Salmon people teach us their sacrifice is our life.
Thank you, salmon people.
The salmon is hung in the smokehouse, where the slow-burning cedar embers impart a flavor essential for preservation.
Slow now. Feel the bone.
The annual salmon runs sustain the Haida communities of Haida Gwaii, a tradition upheld for thousands of years.
The salmon are a gift, always.
Please, take more for your family.
Thank you. We are grateful for the abundance. His voice, like the river, carries the old stories.
We must honor the salmon people, for their sacrifice feeds our bodies and our souls.
The salmon people return to us
We honor the sacred journey. Yahalgidang skantlage, itlutlagang hulga.
For thousands of years, survival in North America depended not on walls, weapons, or machines, but on knowledge. Indigenous peoples learned to survive by watching, remembering, and teaching. Every landscape was a library, and every generation added to its pages. Long before written language, Native Americans developed systems of understanding that allowed them to live in some of the most challenging environments on Earth. From early childhood, observation was a skill as important as strength. Children learned to recognize the difference between fresh and old tracks, to hear changes in bird calls, and to notice when the wind shifted direction. These were not small details. A sudden silence in the forest could signal danger. A change in animal behavior could predict a storm days in advance. Knowledge was survival, and mistakes were remembered. Hunting was never random. It was planned weeks, sometimes months ahead. Elders remembered where herds had moved in past years, which valleys filled with snow first, which rivers froze last. These memories guided decisions about when to move camps, when to hunt, and when to wait. Hunters rarely rushed. They understood that wasted energy could be as deadly as hunger. Patience was a tool sharpened over generations. Food gathering followed strict rules shaped by experience. Plants were harvested only at certain times when their nutrients were strongest. Roots were taken carefully so that they would grow again. Fishing spots were rotated to avoid depletion. These practices were not superstition. They were early forms of ecological management, refined through centuries of trial and consequence. Shelters reflected deep environmental understanding. Homes were built where wind patterns reduced heat loss, where snow drifted away instead of piling up, and where summer heat could escape. Materials were chosen not for appearance, but for performance. Bark, earth, hide, stone, and snow were all used differently depending on climate. Each design carried generations of testing behind it. Navigation relied on memory and landmarks rather than maps. Mountains, unusual trees, rock formations, and river bends became reference points in mental maps passed from elder to child. Night travel depended on stars, their positions remembered season by season. Losing direction was rare because the land itself was constantly red. Winter demanded the highest level of planning. Long before the first snowfall, food stores were checked, clothing repaired, tools sharpened. Hunters adjusted strategies, knowing animals moved slower but required more effort to reach. Travel routes changed, risk increased. Communities relied heavily on cooperation because isolation in winter often meant death. Storytelling played a critical role in survival. Stories were not simply entertainment. They contained warnings, instructions, and lessons encoded in memorable narratives. Tales of failed hunts explained what not to do. Stories of successful journeys preserved routes and strategies. Even myths often reflected real environmental dangers, such as floods, avalanches, or starvation. Animals were teachers as much as resources. Wolves demonstrated cooperation. Bears showed when to rest and conserve energy. Birds signaled seasonal change. By observing animals, Native Americans refined their own behavior. This constant learning created a dynamic relationship between people and nature where adaptation never stopped. When Europeans arrived, they brought new tools, animals, and ideas, but they also underestimated the sophistication of indigenous knowledge. Survival systems developed over thousands of years were dismissed because they were unwritten. Yet many newcomers relied on native guidance to survive winters, find food, and navigate unfamiliar terrain. Despite dramatic change, the foundation remained. Knowledge continued to pass from one generation to the next. Even today, traditional ecological understanding influences conservation, wildlife management, and sustainable living practices across North America. The story of Native Americans is not only one of endurance, but of intelligence shaped by environment. Their survival was built not on domination of nature, but on attention, memory, and respect. In a world without modern technology, they mastered something far more powerful: the ability to live by understanding the land itself.
Heavy. Now.
Let's see.
Like this?
Slow. Feel grain. It breaks.
The cold will be sharp this year.
Good shelter.
See how the weight shifts here.
The bear sleeps deep then, but the rabbit has quickness, but needs the soft snow to hide.
The stories say that in the deepest part of winter, the spirits listen closely to our words. The lodge fire keeps us warm, just as the old stories keep our spirits warm through the winter night. Do not stray far from the path when the snow lies deep.
When the white wind comes, seek shelter always. In the time before this time, the wind carried the voices of the ancients across the frozen lake.
The wolves teach us patience. Never waste strength.
The hunter's path, always there.
Look.
The land awakens.
Ready the big sled.
They pass here, always.
Like this, see?
Doing so. And so the winter taught us patience.
See that peak? It tells us we are almost there.
Only take what you need, and always leave some for next year.
Welcome home, brothers. We waited for you.
Steady. Like this.
Fresh.
Shallow here.
This one, good for the stomach.
It remembers.
Steady.
We look for the straightest grain, unbroken, only the best cedar for the frame.
Keep your blade flat, feel the grain. Here, spruce, they
Almost.
This one holds the good medicine.
Here, Kai. Steady.
Watch the tension on the root. It must be even against the cedar.
I see the flex in the wood now.
Steady, Kai.
Make sure the pitch flows deep into the seams.
It is smooth here, Kian.
We must ensure it is fully watertight before the journey.
It is done.
Long before the arrival of Europeans, North America was a continent defined by its animal life. Vast migrations, deep forests filled with movement, rivers alive with fish, and coasts shaped by marine giants. For thousands of years, Native American nations built their lives in harmony with the creatures they lived alongside. Animals were not simply hunted or observed. They were teachers, partners, indicators of seasonal change, and symbols of spiritual power. Their presence shaped technology, language, ceremony, architecture, and survival itself. Among all the animals that walked beside the first peoples, the earliest and most loyal companion was the dog. Archaeological evidence shows that indigenous dogs lived in North America for more than 10,000 years, long before the continent saw a single horse or cow. These dogs helped track animals, guarded camps, pulled small sleds, and accompanied hunters on long journeys. They were family members, trusted partners who shared warmth in winter shelters and guided travelers through unfamiliar terrain. In some regions, specialized breeds were developed for tasks like hunting, hauling, or protection. The bond between person and dog was one of the oldest and most enduring relationships on the continent. In the dry, sun-scorched Southwest, another creature lived close to human settlements, the turkey. Pueblo peoples domesticated turkeys not just for their meat, but for their feathers, which were woven into warm blankets that rivaled any hide. Their bones became tools, their eggs provided nourishment, and their presence was woven into ritual life. Turkey pens stood beside clay homes, their soft calls echoing through ancient villages built into desert cliffs. But while domesticated animals were few, the world of wild animals was immense. The Great Plains were dominated by the bison, a creature so vital, so central, that it shaped entire civilizations. Bison fed the people, clothed them, sheltered them, and provided tools and ceremonial items. Hunters learned the behavior of these animals with the precision of natural scientists. how they reacted to wind, how herds formed protective circles, where they traveled in winter, and how to approach without causing panic. The bison was not a domesticated creature, yet its relationship with humans was one of the most sophisticated interdependencies in the ancient world. In the eastern woodlands, the white-tailed deer held a similar significance. Deer hides became clothing soft and durable enough for harsh winters. Their antlers became tools, ornaments, and ceremonial objects. Their meat sustained families during difficult seasons. Hunters learned to track deer through dense forests where visibility was limited to a few meters. Every snapped twig or bent fern held meaning. Black bears provided rich fat essential for winter survival. Beavers shaped entire ecosystems, building wetlands that attracted fish and waterfowl. Rabbits and hares offered dependable food when larger game moved elsewhere. Each creature filled a unique role in the delicate balance of woodland survival. Rivers and lakes formed entire worlds of their own. In the Pacific Northwest, salmon were more than a resource. They were a cycle of life. Entire cultures timed their year around the salmon runs. Fishing weirs, carved cedar hooks, bone harpoons, and stone traps reflected generations of engineering knowledge. Farther inland, trout, walleye, sturgeon, and eels sustained diverse communities. The sound of water flowing over stone was not just nature's voice, it was the pulse of civilization. In the Arctic and subarctic, where survival demanded precise knowledge, the relationships between humans and animals reached extraordinary depth. Caribou migrations determined food supplies. Seals, hunted at their breathing holes in the ice, provided meat, fuel, skins, and tools. Walrus tusks became carvings and weapons. Whales offered an abundance that supported entire villages through the darkest winter months. Hunters read the ice as easily as others read the wind. A single crack, a distant splash, a shifting shadow beneath the frozen surface revealed the presence of animals essential to survival. Across all regions, birds played a vital role as well. Eagles symbolized strength and vision, their feathers used in sacred ceremonies. Ducks and geese provided seasonal feasts, their migrations marking the turning of the year. Songbirds carried weather cues, warning communities of storms or early frost. Even insects, from bees to certain larvae, contributed food and materials. But perhaps the most defining feature of indigenous life was not which animals existed, but which did not. Before European contact, North America had no domesticated horses, no cattle, no pigs, no sheep, no goats, and no draft animals. These creatures simply did not exist on the continent. The arrival of Europeans changed that world forever. Horses brought by the Spanish in the 1500s escaped or were traded across nations, transforming mobility, hunting, warfare, and trade. Peoples of the Great Plains became some of the finest horse riders in the world within a few generations. Yet horses were entirely new to their ancestors. Cattle reshaped grasslands. Pigs, which reproduced rapidly and were allowed to roam freely, damaged crops and disrupted ecosystems. Sheep and goats competed with native animals for grazing land. None of these animals belonged to the original ecological fabric of North America. Their introduction reshaped both environment and culture. And yet, the deep connection between Native Americans and the continent's original animals endured. Each creature had a role, a purpose, and a relationship with the people. Animals taught humans how to survive winters, how to follow the seasons, how to track, how to move, and how to live without overusing the land. They offered clothing, shelter, food, technology, and identity. Respect was not optional, it was essential. Ceremonies were held to honor the spirits of animals taken in the hunt. Stories passed down through generations explained how each species came to share the earth with humans. Nature was not owned but shared, not controlled but understood. Today, many indigenous nations continue to live by those teachings, protecting wildlife, restoring ancestral lands, and preserving traditional ecological knowledge that has survived for thousands of years. The story of Native Americans is inseparable from the animals that shaped their world, from loyal dogs to vast bison herds, from turkeys in desert villages to salmon in roaring rivers. Together, people and animals built a world defined not by domination, but by balance, a legacy of coexistence that remains one of the most remarkable chapters in human history.
Spirit of the deer, we thank you.
And so Raven brought the light, long before the salmon returned to the rivers.
Look here. Looking for him. We're behind you.
Pull it tighter, there.
Good birds.
Are they?